He doesn't want to see you. 5 words that sliced through me like a surgeon's scalpel, precise and devastating. I stood in the sterile hallway of Boston Memorial Hospital, my hand still clutching my phone, where the emergency alert about James had come through. Just 40 minutes earlier. That's not possible, I said, trying to step around Michael, my husband's son. James would ask for me. Michael Thornton, 35, with his father's height, but none of his warmth, shifted to block my path. His sister Bridget stood slightly behind him, her face a mask of cold determination. Security has been informed that you're not on the visitor list, Michael continued, his voice clinically detached, as if addressing an opposing counsel rather than his stepmother. It would be better if you left now, Isabella. I'm his wife, I said, my voice breaking despite my effort to remain composed. We've been married for 8 years. I have every right. You have no rights here. Bridget interjected, her designer clothes and perfect makeup, a stark contrast to my paint-splattered jeans and hastily thrown-on sweater. Dad's made his wishes clear. He doesn't want you here during this situation. As if James having a heart attack was an inconvenient business meeting. As if the love of my life wasn't fighting for his breath behind those closed doors. I don't believe you, I said, my initial shock hardening into resolve. Let me speak to his doctor. Dr. Liu is busy trying to save our father's life, Michael replied, and as his legal proxy for medical decisions, I've instructed the staff that you are not to receive any information about his condition. A security guard approached, summoned by some silent signal from Michael. Is there a problem here? He asked, looking between us. No problem, Michael said smoothly. Mrs. Thornton was just leaving. Morales. I corrected automatically. Isabella Morales. I kept my name. A small act of independence that had never bothered James, but had always irked his children. The guard looked at me with a mixture of pity and firmness. Ma'am, if you're not on the approved visitor list, I'll have to ask you to step out to the waiting area. I looked from the guard to Michael to Bridget, searching for any crack in their united front, any hint of humanity or compassion. There was none. This isn't right, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. This isn't what James would want. You don't know what our father would want. Bridget snapped, her composed facade slipping for a moment. You never have. 20 minutes later, I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage, tears streaming down my face as I frantically called everyone I could think of who might help. Our family doctor. Unreachable James's business partner. No answer. Even our pastor, who had married us 8 years earlier, in a ceremony that Michael and Bridget had refused to attend. I'm so sorry, Isabella, Pastor Reynolds said after hearing my situation. Without being on the visitor list or having medical power of attorney, there's not much that can be done immediately, but I'll come down there and see if I can talk to them. It was the first kindness I'd been shown since receiving the call about James's heart attack, and it brought fresh tears to my eyes. Thank you, I managed to say before ending the call. I looked at my phone's wallpaper, a picture of James and me from our anniversary trip to Santorini just 2 months ago. His arm was around my waist, his silver hair tousled by the Mediterranean breeze, his smile as bright as the whitewashed buildings behind us. He looked healthy, happy, not like a man whose heart was about to betray him. How had we gotten here? How had the love story that had given me a second chance at happiness turned into this nightmare? I had met James Thornton at an art exhibition in Boston 8 years ago. I was 54, a moderately successful painter, specializing in vibrant, large-scale landscapes. Recently divorced from a brief, misguided marriage in my 40s, James was 62. A widower of 5 years, a self-made real estate developer with an unexpected appreciation for art. Your work reminds me that there's beauty even in chaos, he had said, standing before my largest canvas that night. That's something I've been trying to remember lately. We were married within a year, despite the immediate and vocal disapproval of his adult children, Michael, then 27, and already climbing the ranks at a prestigious corporate law firm, had immediately suspected me of being a gold digger. Bridget, 24 at the time, and just launching her career in fashion design, had been slightly warmer initially, but grew increasingly distant as her brother's influence over her strengthened. I had tried everything to win them over. Thoughtful birthday gifts, interest in their careers, never trying to replace their mother. Catherine, who had by all accounts been a wonderful woman, but my efforts were met with polite disdain, at best outright hostility at worst. James had been caught in the middle, loving his children, but frustrated by their treatment of me. "They'll come around," he would say, though the conviction in his voice weakened with each passing year. They just need time. And 8 years, it seemed, had not been enough time. And now, when it mattered most, they had used their positions of influence to cut me out completely. Pastor Reynolds arrived at the hospital about an hour after my call, his kind face drawn with concern when he found me still sitting in my car. "I spoke with the charge nurse," he said, leaning down by my window, "and I'm afraid I don't have good news. Michael has legal medical power of attorney for James. It's all in order, and he's explicitly instructed that no information is to be given to anyone but himself and Bridget." That power of attorney was from years ago. I said, the desperation in my voice painful even to my own ears. Before we were married, James told me he was going to update it. The pastor's silence told me what I already knew. Intentions didn't matter. Only legal documents did. "What am I supposed to do?" I asked, not really expecting an answer. "Just sit here in the parking garage while my husband might be dying." "I wish I had better answers." Pastor Reynolds said, "I'll keep trying to reach Michael and Bridget. Perhaps when the immediate crisis passes, they'll be more reasonable." But I knew better. This wasn't about reasonableness. This was the culmination of years of resentment, a power play they had been waiting to make. I stayed in that parking garage for the next 72 hours, leaving only briefly to use the hospital's public restrooms or to grab coffee from the cafeteria. I sent texts to James's phone, knowing he probably couldn't read them, but needing to feel connected to him. Somehow I called Michael and Bridget repeatedly, my calls going straight to voicemail. I approached the information desk hourly, only to be told they had no information they could share with me. On the second night, sleeping fitfully in my reclined driver's seat, I was awakened by a tap on my window. A young woman in scrubs stood there, her expression sympathetic. "Mrs. Thornton?" she asked when I rolled down the window. "Morales," I corrected again, sitting up quickly. "Isabella Morales. Do you have news about James?" She glanced around nervously. "I shouldn't be talking to you, but I'm on Dr. Lou's team, and I don't think what's happening is right. Mr. Thornton has been asking for you." My heart leapt. "He's conscious. He's asking for me." She nodded. "He had surgery yesterday, a triple bypass. He's stable now, but weak. When he woke up, your name was the first word he said. But when Dr. Lou told his son that Mr. Thornton was asking for you..." She hesitated. "He what?" "He told her that you two were in the middle of a separation, that seeing you would only upset his father and potentially compromise his recovery." She looked down. "Dr. Lou had to respect the medical proxy's decision, but she doesn't feel right about it. None of us do." Tears of anger and relief mingled on my cheeks. Anger at the cruel deception, relief that James was alive and asking for me. "Thank you," I said, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "Thank you for telling me." "I have to get back," she said. "I've already risked too much, but..." She hesitated again. "What is it?" "Mr. Thornton mentioned something about his study. A lockbox. He seemed very agitated about it until Dr. Lou promised to tell you if she saw you." Before I could ask anything more, she hurried away, disappearing back into the hospital entrance. James was alive. He was asking for me. And there was something important in his study lockbox. For the first time in 3 days, I felt a flicker of hope. That hope was extinguished the next morning when I approached the hospital entrance and was met by a different security guard. "Isabella Morales?" he asked. Consulting a clipboard. "Yes, I confirmed, surprised to be addressed by name. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. He said not unkindly but firmly. What why? We've received a complaint of harassment from a patient's family member. They've identified you as the individual in question and have requested that you be removed from the property. Harassment, I repeated incredulously. I've been sitting in my car. I haven't even been allowed inside to see my husband. Ma'am, I don't make the rules, he said, his tone softening slightly. But I do have to enforce them. If you don't leave voluntarily, I'll have to call the police. Defeated and humiliated, I returned to my car. As I turned the key in the ignition, my phone rang an unknown number. Mrs. Morales, a woman's voice asked when I answered. This is Dr. Vanessa Liu, your husband's cardiologist. Yes, I said, my hand tightening on the phone. How is he? Please, I've been kept completely in the dark. There was a pause then. I'm calling to inform you that James Thornton passed away 20 minutes ago. I'm very sorry for your loss. The world stopped. Everything. The cars driving past the hospital looming in my rearview mirror. My own heartbeat seemed to freeze in that moment. What? I whispered, but I was told he was stable, that he had surgery and was recovering. There were complications. Dr. Liu said, her voice professional but tinged with genuine sympathy. A second cardiac event more severe than the first. We did everything we could. And he was alone? I asked, though I already knew the answer without me. Another pause. His children were with him, she said finally. I really am very sorry. Mrs. Morales, I wish circumstances had been different. After we disconnected, I sat motionless in my car, for I don't know how long James was gone. My husband, my partner, my best friend gone without even a chance to say goodbye. No final words. No hand to hold. No opportunity to tell him one last time that I loved him. The funeral was a blur of black clothing and hollow condolences. Michael had arranged everything, informing me of the details via a terse email as if I were a distant acquaintance rather than James's widow. I was seated in the back row of the church far from the family section, where Michael and Bridget received the sympathies of Boston's business elite. Pastor Reynolds, to his credit, mentioned me prominently in the service, referring to me as James's beloved wife, who brought light and color back into his life. I saw Michael stiffen at those words, saw Bridget's perfectly manicured hand reach over to squeeze his arm in restraint. I didn't go to the cemetery. There was no place for me there, and I couldn't bear to be treated like an intruder at my own husband's burial. Instead, I went home to the Beacon Hill brownstone. James and I had shared the home that still held his presence in every corner. His reading glasses on the side table, his favorite scotch in the bar cabinet, his slippers by his chair. 2 weeks later, I received a formal letter from Harold Goldman, James's longtime attorney. It requested my presence at the reading of James's will, scheduled for the following Monday at 10 a.m. at Goldman's downtown office. I nearly didn't go. What was the point? Michael had made it abundantly clear that I was to be excised from the Thornton family as completely as possible. The will reading would likely be just another opportunity for humiliation. But something, perhaps the memory of the nurse's words about James asking for me about the lockbox in his study, compelled me to go. If nothing else, I owed it to James to hear his final wishes, even if they didn't include me. Goldman's office was exactly what you would expect from a high-end Boston attorney. All darkwood leather-bound law books and discreet wealth. When I arrived precisely at 10 a.m., Michael and Bridget were already seated in the conference room, neither acknowledging my entrance. Mrs. Morales, thank you for joining us, Harold Goldman said, rising to shake my hand. He was an older man, probably in his 70s, with a dignified manner that reminded me somewhat of James. Please have a seat. I took the chair farthest from Michael and Bridget, keeping my eyes forward, even as I felt their glares burning into the side of my face. Before we begin the formal reading, Goldman continued, I want to express my personal condolences. James was not just my client but my friend for over 30 years. His loss is deeply felt. I nodded my thanks, not trusting my voice. Now, Goldman said, opening a thick folder, let's proceed with the last will and testament of James. Edward Thornton revised and signed 6 months ago. 6 months ago. That detail made me glance up sharply. James hadn't mentioned revising his will recently. What had changed? Goldman began reading the standard legal preamble. His voice measured and professional. Michael shifted impatiently in his seat. Can we skip to the distributions? He interrupted. We're all familiar with the legal boilerplate. Goldman gave him a look that would have withered a lesser man. In my experience, Mr. Thornton Haste. In these matters rarely serves anyone well, but as you wish. He flipped forward several pages, then cleared his throat. To my son Michael James Thornton, I leave the sum of $1 million and my collection of antique watches with the exception of the Patek Philippe Calatrava, which has a separate designation. Michael's expression darkened. $1 million was a substantial sum to most people, but it was a fraction of James's considerable estate, and the watch collection without the Patek, his most valuable timepiece, was clearly not what Michael had expected. To my daughter, Bridget Catherine Thornton, I leave the sum of $1 million and the vacation property in Cape Cod, with the understanding that it is to remain available for family use and is not to be sold for a period of at least 10 years. Bridget's face remained carefully composed, but I saw her knuckles whiten as she gripped the armrests of her chair. Goldman continued, his voice betraying no emotion. To my wife, Isabella Maria Morales, I leave our primary residence at 42 Beacon Street, all its contents, my entire art collection, the Patek Philippe Calatrava, watch she gave me on our 5th anniversary, and 60% ownership stake in Thornton Development Corporation. The room went absolutely still. I felt as if all the oxygen had been sucked out, leaving only a vacuum of stunned silence. 60% of Thornton Development, the controlling interest in the company James had built from nothing, the company that was worth tens of millions. That's impossible, Michael finally said, his voice strangled. There must be some mistake. There is no mistake, Goldman replied calmly. The will is quite clear and was executed with all proper legal formalities. We'll contest it, Michael said immediately, looking to his sister for confirmation. Dad wasn't in his right mind. She manipulated him, influenced him unduly. I anticipated you might take that position, Goldman said, reaching for another document, which is why your father prepared this as well. He slid a USB drive into his computer, and suddenly James's face appeared on the large screen mounted on the conference room wall. My heart contracted painfully at the sight of him, healthy, vital, so present despite being gone. If you're watching this, recorded James began, then I'm no longer here, and Harold is executing my will. And if Harold felt the need to show you this video, it means that my children are contesting my decisions. James sighed, running a hand through his silver hair in a gesture so familiar it brought tears to my eyes. Michael, Bridget, I love you both. You are my flesh and blood, and nothing can change that. But I am deeply disappointed in the way you've treated Isabella throughout our marriage. Your mother has been gone for 13 years. She would have wanted me to find happiness again, and I did with a woman who loves me for myself, not for my money or status. He leaned closer to the camera, his expression deadly serious. I've changed my will for 2 reasons. First, because Isabella deserves security and recognition as my wife and partner. And second, because I've become increasingly concerned about Michael's intentions regarding Thornton Development. Michael made a choking sound beside me. Son, I've watched you orchestrate a series of questionable financial moves within the company over the past year. Moves that benefit you personally, but put the company and the livelihoods of our 200 employees at risk. I've countermanded these decisions where I could, but I fear what might happen if you gained control after my death." James's expression softened slightly. "I don't believe you're acting out of malice. I think you're trying to prove yourself to make your mark. But your judgment has been clouded by ambition. By giving controlling interest to Isabella, who has no personal agenda beyond honoring my legacy, I'm protecting both the company and ultimately you from yourself." He turned his gaze directly to the camera, and I felt as if he were looking straight at me. "Isabella, mi amor, I suspect my children may try to shut you out when the time comes. They may even try to prevent you from seeing me if I'm ill or hospitalized." And a sob escaped me before I could suppress it. He had known somehow he had anticipated exactly what would happen. "If that occurs," James continued, "remember that I have left instructions with Harold about the lockbox in my study. Everything you need is there, and know that whatever happens, my last thoughts would be of you, of the joy you brought into my life when I thought joy was behind me." He smiled, then the special smile that had always been just for me. "Te amo, Isabella, siempre y para siempre." I love you. Isabella always and forever. The Spanish phrases he had learned for me, practiced diligently, to perfect his pronunciation, wanting to honor my heritage. The video ended and the room fell into silence. Once more, I wiped the tears from my cheeks, suddenly feeling stronger than I had in weeks. James had known, he had prepared. He had protected me even from beyond the grave. "There is one more matter," Goldman said, breaking the heavy silence. "The lockbox James mentioned." He reached into his briefcase and produced a small steel box, which he slid across the table to me. "He left this in my possession, with instructions to give it to you at the will reading." The box was locked, but a small key was taped to the bottom. With shaking hands, I detached it and opened the lockbox. Inside were several items: a USB drive labeled Financial Evidence, a sealed envelope with Michael's name on it, a smaller jewelry box, and a handwritten letter addressed to me. I looked up to find Michael staring at the USB drive, his face drained of color. "What is that?" he demanded. "Your father didn't share the specific contents with me." Goldman replied, "But he indicated it contained documentation of financial irregularities within Thornton Development that correlated with your increased involvement in company operations." "This is slander," Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You can't possibly believe." "What I believe is irrelevant," Goldman interrupted. "The evidence speaks for itself. James conducted a quiet but thorough investigation in the months before his death. If you contest the will, all of this becomes part of the public record." Michael fell silent, his legal mind clearly calculating the implications. I opened the envelope with my name and read James's letter. Privately, tears flowing freely again as his words, his handwriting so familiar and dear, spoke to me one last time. He explained more fully what he had discovered about Michael's financial maneuvers, expressed his heartbreak over his children's treatment of me, and outlined his hopes for how I might lead Thornton Development forward. "You have an artist's vision and a humanitarian's heart." He wrote, "The company needs both. Don't let Michael bully you into selling your shares or stepping aside. You are stronger than you know, mi amor." After I finished reading, I carefully folded the letter and returned it to the envelope. I opened the small jewelry box to find James's Patek Philippe watch, along with a note that simply said, "Time is precious. Spend yours wisely and well." I looked up to find Bridget watching me, her expression no longer hostile but confused, perhaps even uncertain. "My father really loved you," she said, speaking to me directly for the first time since James's hospitalization. "Yes," I said simply, "as I loved him." Michael stood abruptly. "This isn't over," he said, but the threat sounded hollow. "I'll be in touch with my legal team." "Before you go," I said, finding a strength in my voice I hadn't felt since before James's death. "There's the matter of the sealed envelope with your name on it." I held it out to him. After a moment's hesitation, he took it, tore it open, and read the contents. Whatever James had written caused Michael's face to flush, then paled dramatically. Without another word, he stuffed the letter into his pocket and left the room, the door closing with a decisive click behind him. Bridget stood to follow him, then paused. "I'm sorry," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "About the hospital, I shouldn't have. It wasn't right." It wasn't an adequate apology, not nearly enough to make up for denying me the chance to say goodbye to my husband. But it was a start. "No," I agreed quietly. "It wasn't right." She nodded once, then followed her brother out. When they were gone, Goldman turned to me with a kinder expression than he had worn throughout the proceedings. "James knew exactly what he was doing. He said he wanted to protect you and the company he built. I don't know the first thing about running a development corporation." I admitted. "You don't have to run it day to day," Goldman said. "James set up a management structure that can handle operations. Your role is governance vision, something he believed you have in abundance." I looked down at the watch in my hands, feeling its solid weight, hearing the steady tick that seemed to echo James's heartbeat. "Time is precious. Spend yours wisely and well." "What was in Michael's letter?" I asked. Goldman's expression remained neutral. James didn't share that with me, but knowing James, I suspect it was both a boundary and an olive branch. He never gave up hope that his children would eventually come around. In the months that followed, I discovered that Goldman was right on both counts. The letter to Michael had contained evidence of his financial misdeeds, but also a path to redemption. A way for him to make amends and eventually earn back his position within the company, under supervision and with appropriate checks on his authority. It was a testament to James's character that even in his justified anger and disappointment, he had provided a way forward for his son. A difficult path, but a path nonetheless. Bridget approached me first about 2 months after the will reading. She came to the brownstone, nervous but determined, and asked if we could talk over tea in the kitchen, where James and I had shared so many meals. She offered a more complete apology. "I let Michael convince me that you were just after Dad's money," she said, her composure cracking. "It was easier to believe that than to accept that Dad had found love again, that he didn't need us the same way anymore. By the time I realized how wrong we were, the pattern was set." And then at the hospital, I just followed Michael's lead. I always have. "Your father never stopped loving you," I told her. "Never, even when he was disappointed in your choices." "I know that now," she said, wiping away tears. "The things he wrote in that video, the provisions he made in his will, they weren't punitive. They were protective of the company, of us, of you. He was still being our father even at the end." Michael took longer. Nearly 6 months passed before he agreed to meet with me, and even then it was in Goldman's office, as if he needed neutral territory. He didn't apologize. I hadn't expected him to, but he did propose a compromise regarding company operations that acknowledged my controlling interest, while allowing him to continue in a role suited to his skills. Dad was right. He admitted grudgingly, I was trying too hard to prove myself, taking shortcuts that put the company at risk. I've learned my lesson. I didn't fully trust him yet, but I was willing to give him the chance James had wanted him to have. We established a working relationship that, while not warm, was at least professionally respectful. A year after James's death, I used part of my inheritance to establish the James Thornton Arts Foundation, providing grants to emerging artists from disadvantaged backgrounds. At the foundation's opening gala, I displayed a new series of paintings, my first work since James's death. They were landscapes of the places we had traveled together, but with a particular focus on light, breaking through shadows, beauty emerging from darkness. Bridget attended the gala, bringing with her a date who seemed genuinely interested in the artwork. She had begun to carve out her own identity, separate from her brother's influence, and we were slowly building something that, if not quite a family relationship, was at least a connection based on our shared love for James. Michael did not attend, but he sent a surprisingly generous donation to the foundation in his father's name. It was something. A small acknowledgement, perhaps, that James's legacy deserved to be honored. As for me, I was learning to live in a world without James. Some days were harder than others. I still reached for him in the night, still caught myself picking up my phone to share a thought or observation with him. But increasingly, I found myself able to feel gratitude for the 8 years we had shared, rather than only grief for his absence. The lockbox. James had left me, contained one more item I hadn't examined that day in Goldman's office, a small travel journal documenting our trips together with James's observations and reflections. On the last page, written just after our Santorini anniversary trip, he had penned a final note. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you're facing a world that seems darker without us in it together. But remember what you've always taught me through your art. Isabella, that light finds a way through, that beauty persists even in shadow. You brought color back into my life when it had faded to grayscale. Now paint your own canvas again, vibrant and bold. Te amo siempre y para siempre." And so I did. One brushstroke at a time. One day at a time, I began to paint my life with new colors. Colors that honored the palette James and I had created together, but also discovered new hues I hadn't known existed. His adult children had blocked me from his hospital room, had tried to erase me from his life and legacy. But James had known better. He had made provisions not out of suspicion or fear, but out of love and wisdom. His final act had been to ensure that I would be secure, that his company would be protected, and that even his children would have a path forward if they chose to take it. In the end, what I inherited from James Thornton wasn't just property or money or a company. It was the certainty of being truly known and deeply loved, a certainty that even death could not diminish and that no amount of interference could erase. Time is precious. Spend yours wisely and well. Every day I try to honor that instruction, that inheritance, that love. He doesn't want to see you. 5 words that sliced through me like a surgeon's scalpel, precise.